now releasing all goblins.
This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. with free weekly content and free shipping on orders over $150. You can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game features me, Seb, Maxim, and Marie playing some brand new EDH decks. Seb has built Barrowin of Clan Undur, and they keep Deadly Rollick, Seravok's Tome, Thought Vessel, Orzhov's Signet, Swamp, Sir Conrad the Grim, and a Plains. Max is playing one of his favorite decks, Gavi Nest Warden, keeping a Plains, Glacial Fortress, Desert of the Mindful, Arcane Signet, Improbable Alliance, Settle the Wreckage, and Ominous Seas. Marie has built the newly released Frodo and Sam, keeping a Forest, Trail of Crumbs, Teferi's Protection, 2 Plains, Bountiful Promenade, and Eldamri's Call. Last but not least, I have borrowed Felix's Éowyn Shield Maiden deck, keeping 2 Plains, Thought Vessel, Island, Supreme Verdict, Coppercoat Vanguard, and Tori Davenant Fury Rider. Seb wins a die roll and starts us off. They draw and play a Plains. Max just plays a tap Glacial Fortress. Marie draws and plays a tap Sunpetal Grove. I also play a tap land with a Fury Calm Snarl. Seb draws and plays a Swamp, paying 2 for Orzhov's Signet. After that, they pass. Max draws and plays a Plains. He taps 2 for an Arcane Signet. Marie's got a Bountiful Promenade, and then casts Eldamri's Call, tutoring for Atario's Provisioner, and she goes to look for it as she passes. I play an Island and pay 2 for a Coppercoat Vanguard. Seb draws and plays a Plains. They cast a Seasoned Dungeoneer and take the initiative, going to grab a basic and passing. Max plays a Desert of the Mindful, and then casts an Improbable Alliance. He still has enough to cast a Weathered Wayfarer, and passes to Marie. Marie draws and plays a Forest. She then casts Sam, and goes through a combat step, making a food token, and passing. I've got a Plains for turn, and I cast a Thought Vessel. Seb gets to scry 2 from the Undercity, and then draws for turn. They play a Swamp, and cast Seravok's Tome, going further into the Undercity, and this time getting a treasure. Seb then plays a Thought Vessel, and passes. Max draws, and activates Weathered Wayfarer, going to find a mountain, and playing it. He then plays a Boros Signet. Marie draws, and plays a Plains. She then plays the One Ring, gaining protection from everything, and activates it to draw a card. Going to combat, she makes a food token with Sam, and then swings him at Maxim for 2, who takes the hit. After that, she passes, and during her end step, I cast a Path to Exile and take out the Seasoned Dungeoneer. I draw and play a Knight of the White Orchid, going to grab a Prairie Stream. I then play a Plains for turn, and go to combat. I swing the Coppercoat Vanguard at Seb, taking the initiative, and going to grab a mountain as I move into the Undercity. Seb draws, and plays a Swamp. They then cast Barrowin, venturing into the Undercity once more, but doesn't gain the initiative from it. They then cast Acerak, finishing the Undercity, and putting a Radiant Solar into play thanks to the final ability. Seb then ventures again, but this time goes into Dungeon of the Mad Mage. After that, they pass. Max draws and plays Gavi, and then activates the Weathered Wayfarer to go and grab a Raugrin Triome. He plays the Triome as his land for turn, and then cycles for free an Ominous Seas, which makes him a cat token and a fairy token. Marie draws and plays a tireless provisioner. She then shocks in an overgrown tomb. She then casts her second Sam for this game, Samwise Gamgee, and makes a food as she moves to combat. She swings the original Sam at me for 2, and I chump with the Knight of the White Orchid. She passes after that. I scry 2 on my upkeep from the initiative, and then draw. I then play a Mountain, and then a Talisman of Conviction, and I'm able to cast Éowyn. In response, max basic land cycles and Ash Barrens for an island while I'm moving through my turn. I then pass to Seb. Seb draws and goes to combat, swinging the Radiant Solar at me. I take it and lose the initiative, and Seb continues through the Dungeon of the Mad Mage, scrying again. They then play Sir Conrad and activate him, milling everyone for 1, and we each take 2 from 2 creatures being milled. With nothing else, Seb passes. Maxim draws and casts Gift of the Estates, grabbing a Hollowed Fountain, Irrigated Farmland, and Sacred Foundry. He then casts an Anointed Procession, and once it's resolved, cycles the Irrigated Farmland he found for free and makes 2 cat tokens and 2 fairy tokens. He follows up with a Spectator Seeding as his land for turn, and then goes to combat. He swings a fairy token at Seb, dealing 1 and stealing the initiative. This lets Max go and grab an island as he moves into the Undercity, and then he passes. During his end step, Marie activates the One Ring to draw 2 cards. Marie takes 2 from the One Ring and draws. She then plays a Mana Confluence, and then plays out Pippin, Warden of Isengard, and makes a food token and gets to go and tutor for Mary. She then plays Mary and makes a soldier token from the food token coming in thanks to Samwise. Going to combat, she then makes another food token from Sam and passes. I draw and play an Arcane Signet, and then cast Torre d'Avenant. Going to combat, I make 2 night tokens and then pass. During my end step, Seb activates Sarabok's Tome and hits Key to the City, casting it. Seb draws and plays Lightning Greaves, equipping them to Sir Conrad. They then discard Acerak to the key, dealing 1 to their opponents, as Sir Conrad sees a creature go into the graveyard, and makes Barrowin unblockable. Seb then swings Barrowin at Max. Seb is able to then bring back Acerak from Barrowin's trigger, venturing further, and Max then takes 3, and Seb gets to take back the initiative. Seb then exiles the top 2 cards of their library as they move into the next room of Dungeon of the Mad Mage, and then scry 3. In their post-combat main phase, Seb casts a Cloister Gargoyle to complete the dungeon, and gets to cast Fate's Reversal for free, and once more goes back into the Dungeon of the Mad Mage, this time gaining a life and then scrying 1. After all of that venturing, Seb then passes, and during their end step, Max activates a Weathered Wayfarer to go and find a secluded step. Max draws and plays an island. He then plays Min and cycles the secluded step, making 2 fairy tokens, 2 cat tokens, and 2 illusion tokens, which isn't bad for only 1 white. Going to combat, Max swings 3 fairies at Seb, and Seb blocks 2 of them, but still takes 1. This has Max regaining the initiative, and gets to scry 2 from it, and then he plays his Talisman of Creativity. Max then passes, and Marie activates the One Ring during his end step to draw 3. Marie loses her 3, and draws, and then plays Treebeard, getting 3 more food tokens and a soldier. She then once more activates the ring again, drawing 4 cards. And then plays the Shire as her land for turn. Once that's out, she plays a Birds of Paradise. She follows that up with a Banquet Guest, putting 10 into the X, which enters as a 20/20. Marie then activates Pippin, giving everything +3/+3 in haste, and moves to combat, making another food token. She swings the Tireless Provisioner, Samwise, Banquet Guest, and Birds at Maxim, and the rest go at me. However, Max has settled the wreckage for a massive blowout, but Marie's able to save herself at least with a Teferi's protection. With everything phased out, the settle resolves but doesn't exile anything, and then Marie passes. During her end step, I cast Call the Coppercoats and target Maxim, and target Max making a bunch of tokens. I draw and play an island. I then go to combat and swing everything at Seb. In response, they activate Sarevok's Tome. They hit a Justicar's portal, which flickers Barrowin, and as it comes in, ventures again. Seb then blocks a knight, Tori, the Coppercoat Vanguard, and Éowyn, but still takes a massive chunk of damage thanks to Tori's buff and all of my tokens going at them. After that, I pass. Seb draws and discards Acerak to make Barrowin unblockable again. Going to combat, Seb repeats last turn basically, swinging Barrowin at Maxim to take back the initiative, and once more brings back Acerak. Seb then ventures enough to complete the dungeon, and once that's done, casts Flicker Fate from the last room to flicker Barrowin again. Since Barrowin got flickered, Maxim ends up taking no damage, and instead activates Weathered Wafer, while Seb is doing their nonsense. In their post-combat main phase, Seb then plays out Priest of Ancient Lore, as well as a Triumphant Adventurer. I then realized I'd had 5 creatures die to Sir Conrad, so Max and I take 5, but not Marie since she's still phased out. Seb then passes turn. Max draws and cycles a Blasted Landscape to make a bunch of tokens. He then plays a Plains and casts Consecrated Sphinx. He passes after that. Marie phases back in, loses 4 to the ring, and then draws her turn, which has Max drawing 2 from the Sphinx. She then plays a Forest and makes a treasure token from the Provisioner, and then casts Exquisite Blood. Marie then floats the idea of drawing with the One Ring, after all, why shouldn't I, but decides not to because of the Consecrated Sphinx. Instead, she activates Pippin again to give her team +3/+3 in haste, and then plays Toxic Deluge, putting 3 into it to try and wipe the board. Max responds by cycling a Forgotten Cave, and then cycles a Remote Isle and triggers all of his token makers. Max eventually draws into a Neutralize to counter the Deluge, and Marie then cracks a food token to at least gain back the life she lost, and puts 3 +1/+1 counters onto Treebeard. Moving to combat, she swings the Banquet Guest and 2 soldiers at me, and I trace soldiers for soldiers and chump the guest with 5 soldiers to absorb some of the damage, but unfortunately, afterwards, I realize I'm still dead to Sir Conrad's triggers anyway. Marie also gains a ton of life from Exquisite Blood and puts even more counters onto Treebeard, but with nothing else to do, has to pass to Seb. Seb exiles the top 2 with their dungeon and then draws for turn. Max then draws 2, and Seb plays an Urborg from exile. They then activate Sir Conrad to mill everyone for 1, hitting 3 creatures, which deals 3 to Max and 3 to Marie, but Marie actually gains that life back. Seb then activates the key on the Radiant Solar and goes to combat. They swing it at Marie, and Marie responds by activating her ring, drawing 5, and Max gets to draw 10 cards from it. Marie still takes the hit, and after combat, Seb casts Vanquish the Horde, and has to bring out a calculator. We add up that the Sir Conrad trigger definitely kill Max, and Marie then drops to 7. Seb then still has enough to follow it up with a Debt to the Depthless, and finishes off Marie and wins the game. Game review time. So this game was 1 hour, 13 minutes, and 19 seconds, which is kind of the sweet spot in my opinion for filmed EDH games. There's enough action, enough interaction typically, and it condenses down to a nice size. As for the game itself, I think it was pretty great. It seemed like everyone got to do a little bit of what they were trying to do. I found the Éowyn deck was unfortunately missing some draw spells. I think Fiddlix definitely has some, I just didn't get into any of them. So it felt very much like I was very resource starved, having lots of mana but nothing really to do with it. The main draw was Éowyn, I think, but by the time that I had her out and was able to start drawing, it was far too late and I was so far behind. Seb's Barrowin deck was crazy, and it was probably one of the most consistent venturing decks I've ever seen. They did a great job building it, and I thought it had a lot of fun interactions and a lot of fun cards, like that Radiant Solar. It's decks like this that really excite me, as it inspires me to want to build something similar but with my own spin on it. In this case, I'm looking to maybe putting together something that involves venturing and the Undercity, because it looked like it was a lot of fun. And just as exciting as new decks are, it's great to see old decks performing well, and Gavi certainly did that. Unfortunately, Max was missing some of the payoffs for making his tokens like Perforos or Impact Tremors, but my goodness, if he had probably at least one more turn, he would have been swinging for probably lethal on anyone on the board. Speaking of swinging for lethal, Marie's deck was great, and I love that Banquet Guest being so massive. Affinity for food is such a fun mechanic and so weird and yet so flavorful. I also thought that Pippin's ability was actually really good, and it's kinda surprising to see haste in a green and black based card. I thought for sure she was going to get completely blown out once that Settle the Wreckage hit the stack, but I didn't know that she had the Defarious protection from early on and was able to protect herself. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.